Oh, yeah, we got to get
We got to get the
obligatory selfie,
picture.
especially for your first podcast.
Do I have my eyes open?
Yeah, mine are never
Okay.
open. I'm
Well,
so
mine
tired.
aren't either sometimes.
Much better. Well, although you look somewhat...
Oh, I look surprised. Let's do it
okay,
again.
yeah, we can't do that.
Thank you.
As long as I look good, screw the gas. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Inside Look. I'm Jeff Lyons, joined by the president and CEO of WNIN, Channel 9, and the radio station, of course, Tim Black. How you doing, Tim?
Hey, Jeff, I'm good.
Thanks for coming over here.
You're welcome.
Now, I hope you don't feel like you're in enemy territory. You know, we're commercial broadcast operation here. You're public. But I think there's a lot that we do together and a lot that we try to accomplish here in the community.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be a wealth of, topics to talk about. But I want to talk about you first.
Okay.
If that's all right.
That's quite all right.
You're, like I like to say, a survivor, a veteran here of the tri-state market.
Yeah.
When did you come to 44?
Jeff, I was thinking about that on the way over here. I started in this market in February of 1992. So what is that? 34 years ago.
Yeah, something like that.
Wow.
You're talking to the guy that's been here 38.
Okay,
So you're one of us. You're a
Yes.
veteran and a survivor. And that was when 44 launched a newscast,
Yes,
correct?
it was.
WEVV.
Yeah.
So you were among the first on there. I don't think you were in the was it Jim Flink and Jody Salen?
Yes.
Kurt Dusterberg were the first anchors over there.
They were first. Actually, there was a single anchor before even they came on. Paul Morrison.
Oh, that's right.
I think
Yes.
so. Anyway,
Okay.
I was one of the first wave of people who came through over there.
Right. So you came in as a reporter and then moved your way up. And of course, I'm curious about the career arc that you go from working there to running a TV station.
Yeah.
So how long were you at 44, and were you there then for the first closing or shuttering of the news operation?
I was not there for the first closing or shuttering of the news operation. I was at Channel 44 for roughly 20, I'm going to say, I think it was probably 27 years. I mean, I was there a long time.
Yeah.
And yes, I started as a reporter, but you know how those things go, especially at a news station. There was a lot of turnover. And so, at a very young age, I kept getting to move into different.
Yeah, you were news director too for a while,
I
right?
was news director. I did promotions for a while, and then eventually became the general manager there.
Yeah, and so what was that like then, to go from working in the circus to running it?
Well, that's a funny. Obviously, I got started in this business. I always used to tell people all the time that I was going to be the next Tom Brokaw. And
you look a little like him,
And that's where my path was, as I was going to keep doing the on-air thing, and somehow, you know how those things go. I mean, if you're going to keep doing that and you're going to continue to be successful and really move up the ladder, you've usually got to hop around every couple of years.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. I ended up staying in Evansville, and because of all the turnover and the newness of the station, opportunities kept happening, and a lot of the folks at the corporate level, I guess they saw something in me, and they kept really pushing me away from the talent side of things and into management.
Right.
And I resisted that at first because, like I said, I was going to be the next Tom Brokaw, and then I started playing around with that, and as it turns out, better hours, better money. It worked out to be a pretty good deal.
Better parking space too,
That's
right?
Exactly.
So when did WNIN then come into your realm?
I've been at WNIN now I've been there for 11 years. I was not at WEVV for any of the news shuttering, but I was there when the station was sold. And as is so often the case, when you're working at a station like that and you're at the top of the heap and it gets sold, you're the first one
That's exactly
out the
right.
front door.
Yeah.
And then WNIN approached me about coming on board as their development manager.
Yeah.
So I did that for several years before running the station.
And moved on up.
Yeah.
Talk about just briefly the difference that you've experienced between working in commercial broadcasting and public broadcasting.
Oh, boy. That's a good question. I think one of the first things that you notice, especially when you've been in the news department and that kind of thing, the pace slows down a lot. We really don't have a news department at WNIN like a lot of the commercial stations. We do local news, but it's done at a much slower pace. We don't try to capitalize all the time on the breaking news and that kind of thing. So there's a slower pace in that situation. In public media as opposed to commercial media, we don't sell commercial advertising. We sell what we call underwriting. And so I remember when I was working at WEVV, sometimes the network would change programs at the last minute, and commercials had to be rearranged, or they had to be put in somewhere else at the very last second. We don't have to deal with any of that in the public media world. So once again, it's just it's all the same, but it's just slower, and it's a little bit more, I think, thoughtful in its process.
Yeah. So this has been a tough year for you. I guess that might be a little bit of an understatement. Funding dried up. Corporation for Public Broadcasting. You've had to go out hat in hand, I'm sure, to keep the lights on over there. Describe that and why it's important. Why do you believe in public broadcasting?
Well, so first of all, I'll say why I believe in public broadcasting, because it was a big change for me to go from commercial into public media, and I really didn't have any experience in that world. I feel like I got started in the news business and commercial media at a time when there also was still some, I think, thoughtfulness put into what goes into covering stories and journalism. And a lot of things are getting a little crazy in the journalism world now. So with public media, I think there still is a lot of thoughtfulness. I think we try very hard in public media to do good content, thoughtful content, well-researched content, very factual content, whether that's news or anything else we've got going on. I still think there are a lot of things that we offer in public media, particularly where programming is concerned, that a lot of people don't always have access to. Some of our arts programming and some of our documentary programming, I think, are just second to none, and you just don't always find that everywhere. People make that argument a lot because we have so many layers of media now, but I still think PBS and public media puts its head up a little bit. So I do think it's important, and I didn't even talk about the educational aspect for children particularly.
Which is why public broadcasting began in the first place under Lyndon Johnson and the Great Society and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Sesame Street, and so on. And the idea, of course, at the time, they were talking, mid to late 1966 or 7 or whenever it was in there, there was still a scarcity of channels for broadcasting to go out. It was basically the broadcast channels. And therefore the FCC said, well, look, if you're going to have a license, you've got to serve the public. And then they set aside in the public broadcasting thing, as you know, this is going to be educational TV. And the government foot the bill.
Oh, yeah.
Now we advance to the current time. There are some that'll make the argument, well, why should the government pay for this? All these other stations are doing it, make your own money, which actually you're having to do right now.
We are.
For the most part. So what's the argument you give for having a government support versus independent support?
Well, I think the argument that we've made in the past for government support, one of the first things we would always say is we still, even though we did have government support, it didn't surpass 50% of our budget. So that was one of the first things. The other thing that we said for government support is that we felt like we were contributing to the voice in society, that people were utilizing our services. They were absolutely free. They always have been. And that government support of that was always something that was necessary. And then at the same time, we would approach individuals to make donations to us to help to bolster that, because you can't do it all with just government support. So those were the primary reasons, and we were very fortunate here locally in the Evansville area that we've always received a lot of local support, and we've really seen that over the course of the last few months since all of the budget cutting's been going on.
Yeah, so people have stepped up then.
Oh, absolutely.
The lights are not going off anytime soon. Okay.
They are not. Folks in this community over the course of the last few months, they've always said that it's important, but they have really made it very apparent, and they've said it loudly and clearly the last few months, that public media is important to them, and it's important enough that they're willing to support it, and in some cases in some very big ways.
Yeah. It's a little different in Indiana versus Kentucky. Kentucky has KET.
That's right.
Basically a network of PBS stations like yours. In Indiana, it strikes me that you're kind of more on your own. Yes?
We are.
You're not connected to any of the other stations.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, you mentioned Kentucky, Kentucky, and I always put them out there. I mean, I give them their credit and their due. First of all, I grew up just outside of Murray, Kentucky, so being a child of the 70s and the 80s, I mean, I was around KET all the time. It wasn't uncommon for my second grade teacher in particular to often wheel the television into the room and we watched KET. KET is looked at in the whole national public media system as a real gold standard. But yes, in Indiana, we are on our own. Every television media market in the state of Indiana, most all of them have a PBS station, but they are their own separate television station. Whereas in Kentucky, there's basically one station, and it just gets sent out via translators
It's like a
and
network,
repeaters.
sure. Yeah.
Exactly.
We've here at WFIE, we've partnered in different projects over the
we have.
years. When I first began here, a little longer ago than you in the late 80s, that was anathema.
exactly.
At the time it was like, we're not going to do anything.
Right.
And it went from that to me, being a guest host on the
Yes.
auction and things like
Yeah.
that. So I think that's healthy because in many ways we aren't really competitors. We're serving, it's kind of complementary services. We've got sports and news and so forth here, but as you said, you've got the artsy education that we simply don't have space, time,
Sure.
or resources to produce. The networks aren't going to do that
Right.
unless the FCC, puts their thumb in a press and
Right.
says you
It
will
says
do
you
this.
have to.
Yeah. What are you most proud of at WNIN? And I'm focusing on TV. We should mention, of course, there's a radio side to it. You've got National Public Radio, you have David James, you have many people who have been in this market.
Right.
But what are sort of the crown jewels in your opinion over there?
I think the crown jewel is the fact that we are producing a lot of local content. I mean, you've mentioned David a couple of times. I mean, it's just great to have somebody like David James in our corral over there. He produces a great show called 2 Main Street, and I'll put that out as a little bit of an example because you're correct. We do have a television station and a radio station, but anybody who follows media now, we're in a brave new world with digital content. I'm probably most proud of trying to break down those silos. We really are trying to get away from the idea of doing something on television, on radio, digital. Everything is sort of covering all areas. And David's a perfect example of that because his show started out just as a radio show, but now he produces that for television, and we also do a podcast with that show. So it's covering all the bases. Local content I'm really proud of because we've got David. We have a program we call Newsmakers. We try to work very closely with the state legislature when it's in session and bring longer form. I often tell people when you ask about what I say to people in the community, and this is not a slap at commercial broadcasting. I worked there and I understand the realities of it. I often say that at WNIN and public media, I can devote 30 minutes to something that often in your world it's 30 seconds.
Right.
And I think that's important, and I'm very proud that we're able to provide that.
And I think streaming is kind of giving us here in commercial broadcasting an avenue to do more long-form content, and people are discovering it. It just has to be there, and there has to be a new habit developed. You had partnered or do partner with John Carl and the Field of History class at Wrights High School, and the students produce documentaries that run on the air. Yeah. What kind of feedback do you get on that?
Oh, wow. I mean, anytime that you do anything with students, you always get really positive feedback. And I will tell you, just through my experience right now, not only with situations like that, but even with some of my own employees, these students, they know what they're doing in this new world, and they often come up with some fantastic ideas that I'm really glad, once again, from the standpoint of the public media world and WNIN, I feel like we really give them an opportunity to grow that and to make a much bigger splash with that. But some of their ideas are fantastic.
Yeah. What's a common misconception of what you all do in public broadcasting?
Oh, boy. I think one of the most common misconceptions right now is that everything we do is liberal or, woke, whatever.
There's a political slant.
There's a political slant.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge misconception because I can say very confidently that within this community right now, we get a lot of financial support from individuals and corporations who most people, if they're trying to paint with blue and red and all this other kind of stuff, that are coming from what they might consider to be the other side of the fence. I mean, I think the misconception is that we are in that arena, but the reality is I think we're very much right in the center.
Yeah. Any other things going on? Are you doing the auction this year?
Well, the auction, we still do the auction,
I know you do, but it's different
but
now.
it's online now for the most part.
Yeah.
We don't do the big live event on television. And the main reason that we don't do that is because people don't use the telephone anymore.
Well, that's true.
Back in the day when you were coming over and helping host, I mean, we had a bank of sometimes probably 20 telephones.
Right.
And you put an item up for bid and people called a phone number and you had 5 or 6 different people on a phone, with competing bids, and folks don't use their telephones anymore other than to text and what have you. And so it's just the whole concept and the model didn't work anymore.
It would kind of take away from the excitement too.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have clanging phones in the
Exactly.
background over there. You said you grew up near Murray, Kentucky. What was your path from there then into, was Evansville your first job?
Yes.
Then? First broadcasting
It was
job?
my first broadcasting job.
And just out of pure happenstance, or you had your heart set on moving up here? Or?
You know what? No, it was one of those things that, first of all, even in terms of going into the news business, I mean, I just a combination of things. I was very heavily involved in speech and debate when I was even back to like 7th grade. One of the very first categories that I competed in was radio broadcasting, so I sort of got the bug then. My high school had a television station. And, again, at that time, it seemed like television was such a big thing. I mean, we did at that point have basically only 3 channels, and news was a big thing. And I got fascinated with it and started going down that path. And then when I graduated from Murray State University, you start sending out tapes of your work, and Evansville was one of the first places that bid. I didn't really have any particular place chosen of, I want to go here or there. I was just looking for a job.
Yeah, as all of us were. I actually had a job offer in Joplin, Missouri.
Oh, okay.
But I took the one in Terre Haute because it was closer.
Because it was closer.
And closer to my girlfriend, too. So
Well,
it all worked out. But, that's how it usually begins.
Yeah.
Hard to believe you've been in the market that many years. I knew it was a
know.
long time, but I didn't know it was over 30.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Did you get your special badge and, award for that from anybody?
No. I haven't. In fact, I hadn't even, I get kidded all the time about being horrible with math, and I've double-checked that number a couple of times before I came over here to do the thing, because I'm like, wow, I didn't realize. I usually just tell people I've been here about 30 years, and then when I actually started thinking about it, it's like, oh my, it's almost 35.
It's getting serious in there. And you mentioned this is the first time you've been on a podcast.
First time I've ever been on a podcast.
Well, how was it for you then?
Oh, it's fantastic.
Okay.
I love it. Yeah, we produce at least 3 podcasts at WNIN, and I've never been on
you
one.
Could just walk down the hall. Well,
I could.
And I had our general manager, Jay Hyde, on, because I'm a brown noser. I mean, that's well known. But you need to talk to some people or send some memos.
I probably need to twist David's arm just a little bit.
There you go. Well,
get in there.
So here's the relationship with David James. We oftentimes will have the same guests, not at the same time,
right.
but we watch each other's shows.
Okay.
And there's a certain respect. Obviously, I mean, David's a legend. So
Sure.
I can't really, pick off guests from him, but I'll see somebody and think, wow, that's a good one. But we had one last week that we did a week apart. We didn't know neither of us, the other one had him. And I watched listened to Two Main Street. I'm like, he's going to be on my thing Monday, and so we'll space him out a little.
There you
bit.
go. That's good.
But we can all get along together here,
Yes,
in the media
absolutely.
sphere.
Well, I think it's important that we all get along right now, because there's a lot of chatter and chaos out there, and I think some of the more legacy, entities and those that have had their feet on the ground for a while, I think it's a good thing to get together occasionally.
Yeah, it is. Tim Black, thanks so much.
Thanks
for coming
a bunch,
over
Jeff.
Here on
It was
Inside
fun.
Look. Yeah, it was fun. I guess I'll just have to text him my bids here for the.
Yeah, exactly. You'll have to do that this year.
Okay, will do. With Tim Black, I'm Jeff Lyons. Thanks for listening to Out and About. If you'd like to watch all of our podcasts, you can do that wherever you get your podcasts. Also, check out our companion show. That's What's the Trend with Aaron Weeks and Casey Mason. That drops every Friday. For Inside Look, I'm Jeff Lyons.